Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, and in today's video, I'm going to walk you through my full setup process for my Canon cameras. I'm going to be using my 5D Mark IV for this setup guide. However, Canon's cameras in terms of menu systems and layout are all very, very similar. So even if you don't have this camera, you should be able to get plenty of useful information out of this video. I'm making this so that I can help you set your camera up for success so that you can go out and get to work without worrying about your menus. Let's get into it. Starting in the menu, I have image quality set to RAW and large JPEG. I don't use the large JPEGs very often, but every now and again, there's something that I want to be able to send off quickly without having to run an edit over it or convert something. So having it set to RAW and JPEG is useful for that. Dual pixel RAW, I always have disabled. I have never used this, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. It allows you to shift the focus of your image after you take it, but it's literally only by like a pixel or two, and it's kind of useless. Image review, I have this turned off. Beep, I have touch to mute. By default, it's on, and it's one of the most annoying things in the universe. So touch to mute is useful, or you can just straight up turn it off. Release shutter without card is always off because I don't want to get out to a shoot, be shooting away, and then realize that I don't have cards in my camera. Lens aberration correction. This is really, really nice. The camera can correct for peripheral illumination, can correct for distortion, chromatic aberration, diffraction. This is lovely. Digital lens optimizer is off. Digital lens optimizer is very nice in terms of what it can do for your image quality. Can increase sharpness, gives you even light and exposure across your frame, correct a whole bunch of different things. But if you have this enabled, taking a photo, just one single exposure is what that was, takes a lot longer. If I have that set to off, it's much, much, much faster. So most of the time, I leave this off. External speed light control is specifically for using like an on-camera flash. I don't use flash, hardly ever. So I just leave that disabled. Exposure compensation is what you think it is. I only really play around with this with custom buttons that I have set, and I'll get to that in a minute. ISO speed settings, the only time I ever come in here is if I want to change the range of my auto ISO. I don't want it ever going past like 12,800 really. So you can change this here, 12,800. Minimum shutter speed. This is set to auto because I've never changed it, but most of the time I'll have it set to not go anywhere below 1/60th of a second. White balance, I change this in the quick menu or using custom buttons I have set up. Custom white balance, I never actually use because this requires that you take a photo and then set the white balance based on that, which I don't like doing. I have another way of changing my white balance, and I'll get to that. White balance bracket shift, I use this a lot, but I don't use it in the menu here. I use it via the quick menu. Color space I have set to Adobe RGB, even though most of the time my work just ends up getting displayed on screens and sRGB is just fine for that. I like having the additional color space available with Adobe RGB, so I just leave that. It's especially useful if you're shooting work that you anticipate using for prints. Picture style, it's in landscape most of the time because that's a lot of what I shoot. Long exposure noise reduction is off because I want to be able to control my noise reduction with my long exposures in post using things like Luminar or Capture One. That said, high ISO speed noise reduction in camera is on. It's on the lowest setting, but I do have it on just for a little bit of cleanup and to deal with any potential like hot pixeling from crazy high ISO speeds in camera, so I have a little bit less work to do in post. Highlight tone priority is on. This gives me basically extra dynamic range in my highlights, but what it does is it locks my base ISO to 200. Dust delete data, never used it. Multiple exposure, never used it. Although I probably should, it'd be kind of fun to play with and I might do a video on it. HDR mode, never use it. If I'm gonna do HDR, I do it properly with bracketing my exposures and then blending them in post. Interval timer, I don't use this. Same goes for bulb timer and anti-flicker shoot. Like this just doesn't get used. A live view shoot is enabled because it is very handy to be able to see your exposure through the live view, and you can kind of get an idea of what your shot's gonna look like instead of relying solely on the meters in the viewfinder. That said, I do shoot through the viewfinder 90% of the time and just roll with the exposure meters because they're nice and accurate. Autofocus method is flexi zone. Flexi zone's great. Touch shutter is 9 times out of 10 disabled. The only times I use it is by accident. So grid display, you have multiple options here. I have it set to just the regular 3x3 rule of thirds, but you can do 6x4 or 3x3 plus diagonal. Aspect ratio is 3x2 by default for a full frame sensor. Exposure simulation is always on. Silent live view shoot, never use it. Metering timer 8 seconds is fine. 8 seconds is the default. In regards to autofocus, I literally do not change anything in any of these. These are all preset cases. I just use it on case 1, multi-purpose, just versatile. And I have never changed any of the things in here. Honestly, I just use single point, one shot, autofocus 99% of the time, and it's just fine. I also don't change anything in any of these other settings except for selectable AF point. By default, it's all points. I have it set to only cross-type autofocus points because they are far more accurate. And then with these, I have never used anything in here. The play menu, I also don't really play with anything in here. I don't think I've ever done anything with this. There are some useful things in here though, like for example, highlight alert. If you take a photo that is overexposed, areas that are bright and overexposed, as in like they're blown out, you can't recover any data, in your highlights will flash. The stuff in here I don't really use very much. Format card is obviously going to be something that's very useful. LCD brightness is maxed because I like to be able to see it. Auto power off is set to disable. I think by default this is like 1 minute, but I have it turned off because it actually drains the battery faster to have it turn off and then be turning it on again and on and off and on and off and on and off over and over and over. So I just have it set to disable. I don't play with anything in here. These other two settings I don't really use anything that's in here. When we get to our custom functions menu, I also don't really change most of this. My exposure level increments are 1/3, ISO speed setting increments are 1/3. This is all left as default. My shutter speed range, I just leave as default. Same with the aperture range. Live view shooting area display, I have set to masked. And then with custom controls, this is where I have things set. I have my shutter button to start metering only. I've removed autofocus from the shutter button because I prefer to back button focus, which I have set to this button right here. This will start and stop the autofocus so I can focus on something and then recompose my shot and take it without having the shutter button change my focus, because I like to focus and recompose quite a bit. None of this other stuff I've really changed. I think it's all default except for my multifunction button here. This will cycle through my my flash exposure compensation, my ISO, my drive mode, autofocus mode, white balance. So if I hit it, now I have ISO here and flash exposure compensation here. If I hit it again, this will let me change my drive mode and my autofocus type. If I hit it again, this will let me change my white balance and my spot metering, as well as the white balance tint or whatever it's called. Then I hit it again and I'm back to this. And then I have the set button so that it will magnify photos in playback, because it's a lot easier to hit stuff over here than it is to reach all the way over here. And then down here, this weird little button thing that's below the joystick that you can't really see, but it's there, I promise. That is my exposure compensation. So if I hold this and then turn the top wheel up here, it'll use exposure compensation when my ISO is in auto. Add cropping information, I don't change any of the stuff in here. And then clear all custom functions. Obviously, that does what it says on the tin. When you get over into the My Menu, I haven't used this because I pretty much have everything set up in here to be set and forget. So now that I have everything customized the way I like it, I can basically just move on, do what I need to do pretty much without ever having to actually go in the menu ever again, unless I need to format a card. But other than that, I pretty much have no reason to touch the menu ever again because everything is set up the way that I like it. In regards to the UI that you're seeing back here on the screen, you spam info enough times, you'll get access to all of it. I leave it like this. which allows me to see like what card I'm recording to, what image formats I'm using, what my white balance and picture profile are, my metering type, my drive mode, etc. And then if I need more like detailed exposure information or a level, you can hit this again and it'll give you a level in the center and gives you a histogram, which is very, very nice. That is how I have my 5D Mark IV set up and working well for me. A lot of features in other Canon DSLRs are very, very similar, so you'll be able to set your camera up in a way that's like this, but you now know like everything that's in the menus, and you can change whatever you want to change and set the thing up to where it works the best for you. So hopefully this video was helpful to you. If you want to see more stuff like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, all the things that the popular YouTubers tell you to do. And if you have any other questions in regards to setting up your camera or what certain settings do, let me know down below in the comments, and there's a solid chance I'll make a video on it to help you out. So hopefully you enjoyed. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.